Funding for the Nashville podcast comes from the neurosurgeons of the Howell Allen Clinic, national leaders in brain and spine surgery, specializing in laser brain tumor surgery and robotic spine surgery. The Howell Allen Clinic. Your life is our life's work.
This is the Nashville podcast. It's August 13th, 2026. On this day in 1907, the first true New York taxicab began taking passengers. Now, that certainly wasn't the start of New Yorkers paying someone to give them a ride. It wasn't even the start of using the word cab. But what the city had before that point were hansom cabs. Most were horse-drawn, although by the turn of the 20th century, some operated using electric batteries. But the really big point to keep in mind about hansom cabs was that there was no standard method for determining how much the drivers would charge people to ride. The fares could be pretty expensive. An entrepreneur named Harry Allen got fed up with those high prices. He imported a fleet of French automobiles, hired drivers, outfitted the cars with meters, and set a firm per-mile fee. This meant the only factor affecting the cost of a ride was the distance covered. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context and backstory from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Allen's first fleet of New York taxis was painted red. It would be a little bit longer before the classic yellow and black color scheme. These days in Nashville, I think it's fair to say the fleet of ride-for-hire cars that people seem to notice the most is painted white. I'm talking, of course, about the electric Jaguars that look like they are wearing tiny black hats that sort of spin. You know, the driverless cars that Waymo has put into service this year. The trial period for Waymo sure felt pretty rough. Thankfully, I haven't heard reports in a while of the autonomous vehicles turning the wrong direction on one-way streets or barreling into construction sites. And they certainly seem to be doing brisk business. While my husband and I waited for a bus home from last weekend's Tomato Arts Fest, we saw Waymos pass our spot on the sidewalk once every few minutes. Now, what you may not know about the fleet is that the rideshare company Lyft is currently building a new facility in Nashville that will essentially serve as home to that fleet when the cars are not in service. And Lyft is heralding that site as a big step forward for the company as a whole. The 80,000 square foot depot is scheduled to open for business sometime this fall. It's being fitted out to have the capacity to charge hundreds of EVs at once. It will also be where crews clean and perform regular maintenance on the vehicles. Now, Lyft is not Waymo. They are separate companies. Lyft's main business model is still rideshare cars driven by humans. But in recent years, the company has expanded to include something it calls FlexDrive, which is a fleet of cars it rents out to drivers so they don't have to put wear and tear on their personal vehicles. And the deal to operate Waymo's depot builds on the fleet maintenance capabilities Lyft had to develop for FlexDrive. Waymo and Lyft are also combining their offerings in Nashville, so you can find rides from both companies on either app. One interesting thing about this development is the public relations messaging from Lyft about what role they have to play. And at first glance, it seems to go right to the biggest concern people tend to voice about Waymo, the lack of humans piloting or driving those cars. Lyft emphasizes the jobs that are being created to staff the Waymo depot and the fact that cars driven by people will always be presented as an option alongside the autonomous ones. It says those factors will help, and I quote, usher in Lyft's vision of a human-centered hybrid future. But the depot and other ride options don't do much to alleviate the very specific points critics generally make about Waymo's lack of human presence, which is the absence of human discernment behind the wheel when things get tricky or confusing on the roads. Hundreds of cars charging in one spot will need a lot of power. Sound familiar? In just a few minutes, concerns about the effects data centers will have on electricity rates. That's coming up after the newscast.
Funding for the Nashville podcast comes from the neurosurgeons of the Howell Allen Clinic, national leaders in brain and spine surgery, specializing in laser brain tumor surgery and robotic spine surgery. The Howell Allen Clinic. Your life is our life's work.
Way back in 1952, the bronze Mercury statue atop Union Station took a tumble. There's been a replacement up there for the past 30 years, and that prompted the question,
the original, I'm wondering where it could be.
Curious Nashville chases down the old bronze with some twists and turns along the way. Learn more and ask your question at wpln.org/curious.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Barring any last-minute interventions, the Tennessee Department of Correction will execute Anthony Darrell Hines by lethal injection this morning. WPLN's Catherine Sweeney explains why there are concerns it might not go according to plan.
This will be the first execution since the department botched its attempt to put Tony Carruthers to death in May. The issue there was establishing IV and central line access. Carruthers had no major medical conditions. Hines has several. In the year leading up to now, he suffered multiple strokes and has been paralyzed on his left side. That has led his muscles to waste away. Muscles keep veins stable and visible, so muscle loss will likely make finding a vein harder. His attorneys also say his left arm and hand are clenched and spasmodic. They asked a federal court to stay the execution to keep the Tennessee Department of Correction from forcing his hand open and his arm straight for the execution. They had already made a separate stay request to the U.S. Supreme Court.
The execution is scheduled for 10 a.m. Executions are also scheduled in Alabama and Oklahoma, making it the first time since 2010 that 3 Americans will be put to death on a single day. A teenager was attacked twice at juvenile justice centers overseen by Tennessee businessman Jason Cruz. In both instances, leadership at the facilities failed to report the incidents to the state. WPLN and ProPublica interviewed more than a dozen former employees from Cruz facilities who say there was an expectation to keep serious incidents a secret. Criminal justice reporter Paige Flager has more on her latest investigation.
The first time Thomas Jarvis was in a Cruz facility, he wound up with bruising across 80% of his body. In his DCS case file, the healthcare provider that found the bruising said it seemed impossible for this type of injury to take place without adults at the facility noticing. Yet facility staff never filed a report about the teen's injury to the state as required. But Thomas says the worst thing to happen to him while in custody happened years later at a different Cruz facility. A surveillance video we obtained shows other youth under the watch of multiple guards dragging Thomas across the floor. Thomas was wearing an anti-suicide smock after he had threatened self-harm, and the youth pulled it up over his head, revealing his naked body. The guards gave the other kids a thumbs up once they locked Thomas in a cell. The facility did not report that incident to the state, nor to Thomas's family as required. Tennessee's Department of Children's Services is already investigating incidents like what happened to Thomas that we uncovered in this investigation. Paige Flager, WPLN News.
Cruz Company contests the findings in the WPLN and ProPublica investigation and denies that Cruz or his company have ever discouraged staff from reporting serious or life-threatening incidents to the state or 911. Cruz declined to comment on what happened to Thomas. To read the full investigation, visit our website, WPLN.org. A small child has died in Cheatham County after being found inside a broken-down van at a family home. This is the second hot car death in Tennessee this year and the 18th nationwide, according to data from Kids and Car Safety. Tennessee is almost entirely drought-free for the first time since last year. Nashville and the majority of the state had been dry since December. WPLN's Caroline Eggers says Tennessee has had a lot of drought on and off in recent memory, but this was one of few stretching more than half a year.
In Nashville, December through July was the driest 8-month stretch on record since the infamous 2007 drought. It affected the entire state. Tennessee is generally water-rich, with plenty of rainfall. But the pattern of droughts mixed in has become more pronounced. State climatologist Andrew Joyner says Tennessee is oscillating between extremes, which makes planning around weather difficult.
I think it makes it pretty complicated. The more we see this kind of back and forth between a lot of rain, a lot of drought.
Planning becomes harder for farmers, utilities, and really anyone who deals with land and water. Droughts stress wildlife and can contribute to wildfires, like in Georgia and Florida this year. Or think back to the Mississippi River bottoming out near Memphis in 2023. And flooding often follows. This pattern is one way the warming planet disrupts life in the Southeast. Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
The Nashville Film Festival will feature 24 world premieres when it opens later next month. The annual event is marking 57 years and continuing its emphasis on music-centric films and documentaries, as well as works produced in Tennessee. Well, few Tennesseans have the financial resources of Martha Ingram or her passion for supporting the arts. At one point, she personally took over the mortgage of the Skirmerhorn Symphony Center, even after leading the fundraising campaign for the initial construction. Alan Valentine just retired as the symphony's CEO. He was asked on WPLN's This Is Nashville whether the city needs another Martha Ingram to step up.
Big advances are made by people who possess the kind of passion, vision, and commitment. And so that's the point at which big steps are made. But once those big steps have been made and are put in place, it really is incumbent on the entire community to line up behind that vision, behind that community that we have here now in Nashville, and support it. It needs to be cared for.
Martha Ingram died last week at 90. A private visitation today will be at St. George Episcopal Church with a private funeral tomorrow morning. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Residents across Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia have packed public meetings in recent months to speak out against data centers. A recurring concern is how the developments could affect the cost of electricity. For the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom, WEKU's Curtis Tate reports this comes as utility prices have already been on the rise.
On a steamy summer evening, the Kentucky Public Service Commission meets at Hancock County High School about 20 miles east of Owensboro. They're here to discuss a data center project in the county seat of Hawesville. More than a dozen residents speak, none of them in support. For some, like Gary Elder of Lewisport, electricity bills were top of mind.
Last month at the house was $440. Last year, during the heat, and I'm sure it will be that way probably my next bill, it was $569. I'm retired. I can't afford a $1,000, $1,100, $1,200 electric bill.
Residents weren't only worried about their current finances. Christy Compton of Falls of the Rough says she's expecting her first grandchild in November. She tells the commissioners she wants future generations to be able to afford to live in the area.
But you have to look at it in the long run and think, what are we going to do for our future? If you worry about your children and your grandchildren, think about that, please.
Data center proposals have multiplied across Kentucky and the surrounding region in the past year. Rural Hancock County, with just under 10,000 people along the Ohio River, is one of the battlegrounds. In July, Maryland-based developer TerraWolf signed a 20-year contract with AI company Anthropic to convert a former aluminum smelter in Hawesville into the justified data campus. It would employ about 100 workers and generate millions of dollars in tax revenue to support local schools. But some at the meeting, like Jacob Hodge of Lewisport, aren't sold on the project.
Emotions in here are high. None of us want this.
TerraWolf representatives attended the Hancock County meeting, but they did not speak. They declined to comment for this story. However, in a presentation to investors on August 5th, CEO Paul Prager explained why TerraWolf is scaling up its presence in Kentucky.
The Commonwealth is increasingly attractive to prospective tenants because of its power infrastructure, business environment, and the constructive engagement we have seen from state, utility, and local stakeholders.
The Kentucky PSC needs to approve or reject TerraWolf's contract with regional electric cooperative Big Rivers and local utility Kenergy for the Hawesville site. Big Rivers has signed President Donald Trump's Ratepayer Protection Pledge, which aims to shield customers from the cost of building power plants and transmission lines to support data centers. Residential customers of Kenergy pay some of the highest monthly bills in Kentucky, according to Heat Map. In June, the average Kenergy bill was more than $200, an increase of 32% since 2021. Jamie Van Nostrand is former chairman of the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities. He says electricity customers are likely to be on the hook for new power infrastructure.
I think generally data centers will cause higher rates.
Regulators and local elected officials have the power to protect electricity customers with legal enforcement that Trump's voluntary pledge lacks. On August 6th, Governor Andy Beshear signed an executive order meant to ensure data centers bear any increases to electricity costs, not residents. TeraWulf's project in Hancock County could be a preview of what residents can expect 4 hours east. In May, the company announced an even larger project called the Muskie Data Campus. For the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom, I'm Curtis Tate.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. And thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review on your app of choice. A little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener-supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.
Funding for the Nash Villager podcast comes from the neurosurgeons of the Howell Allen Clinic, national leaders in brain and spine surgery, specializing in laser brain tumor surgery and robotic spine surgery. The Howell Allen Clinic. Your life is our life's work.